Under the shadow of the Spanish Inquisition, being a woman accused of heresy, witchcraft, or even immodesty could mean a fate more terrifying than death itself. The charge alone, often whispered by a neighbor or priest, was enough to condemn her. No evidence was needed, no defense was heard. Known as La Suprema, the Inquisition worked with cold and cruel efficiency. It was first created in 1478 by the Catholic rulers Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile to hunt down religious dissent. But it soon grew in power. Women, especially those who lived outside normal roles, like healers, midwives, widows, or even wives who spoke too much, were the easiest targets. Many women were accused of brujeria, witchcraft, or of making deals with the devil. Once her name appeared in an edicto de fe, a public list of charges, she was taken from her home, chained, and locked inside dark, wet prison cells. She waited for days or weeks without knowing what crime she was accused of. Fear itself became torture. The inquisitors had no mercy. They did not care about truth. They only wanted confession. Torture was not just allowed, it was a built-in system. Pope Innocent IV had given permission for torture as early as 1252, and under the Inquisition, it became a weapon of control. The goal was never justice, it was obedience. For a woman, falling into the hands of the Inquisition meant losing her voice. Her body became the battleground. Her silence meant guilt. Her scream was expected. Strapado, dislocated without a drop of blood. The chamber was quiet, but not still. High above, a rope creaked as it slid through a pulley. This was the strapado. It looked simple, just a rope, a hook, and a ceiling beam. No knives, no fire, yet it was one of the most feared tools of the Spanish Inquisition. Accused women were not brought here to die, but to confess. Once the decision for torture was made, they were led into the room, their wrists tightly tied behind their back. The rope was pulled through the ceiling and fixed to their arms. With just a nod from the inquisitor, the executioner pulled them into the air, hanging only by their arms. The shoulders carried the whole weight, often causing joints to rip apart and permanent injury. There was no blood, no cut to see. What made the strapado so cruel was the false image of mercy. In official records, it was called a moderate form of persuasion. They claimed it left no scars. But the truth was brutal. Muscles tore, nerves were left with permanent damage. Arms could become useless forever. Sometimes, the torture got even worse when the victim was dropped a little and then yanked back up, making the pain inside her body even more severe. Women who cried out were not believed. Those who stayed silent were pulled up again and again. No one knows the exact number of women who went through the strapado during the long years of the Inquisition. Many records were lost, or maybe never even written. What we have left are a few testimonies and the silent memory of countless others. Torture rooms across Spain and its colonies all had these devices, used from the late 15th century until well into the 18th. To the Inquisition, this was not punishment, it was purification. But to the accused women, many never proven guilty, it was pure suffering. Inflicted not by wild mobs or soldiers, but by a system that believed pain could cleanse the soul. The iron spider, agony forged in fire. Its look was clear, long curved metal arms, ending in sharp hooks, built not to hold, but to destroy. This tool was called the iron spider, and its very name filled women with terror when accused by the Spanish Inquisition. It was designed especially for women, made to hurt while pretending to be interrogation. The iron spider was usually fixed to a stone wall in a cold, echoing chamber. Victims were dragged forward, tied up, accused, already weak from hunger, fear, or earlier torture.
Old accounts suggest inquisitors aimed for body parts that would bring lasting shame or disablement. The hooks, often heated in fire, were pressed against exposed flesh. The point was never truth. The point was forcing a confession through unbearable pain. Records are few, often destroyed or left vague, but the iron spider was said to be used on women accused of heresy, adultery, or of impure relations by the church. Unlike the public tortures, this left scars that went beyond the body. Survivors, if there were any, carried mutilation as a permanent reminder of shame. But these women were never truly tried in any fair court. The Inquisition worked in secret. Guilt was assumed the moment someone was accused. Maybe the most chilling thing about this device was how clearly it was made for women. The Inquisition claimed to save souls, but it often used the female body as both a symbol of temptation and a target of control. Devices like the iron spider weren't random tools. They were carefully designed acts of domination, performed under the masquerade of religion. The rack, stretching truth from the accused. Iron chains rattled as a woman's wrists and ankles were tied to opposite ends of a wooden frame. This device was known as la tortura del potro, or the torture of the colt. Looked simple, but its pain was unbearable.
The woman was not yet guilty in the eyes of the law. She had only been accused, maybe of witchcraft, heresy, or of making deals with the devil. And still her body was about to become the battleground for a confession she might never have wanted to give. The rack, as it was later called in English, was a rectangular wooden frame with rollers at both ends. Ropes were tied to the victim's wrists and ankles. As the interrogators turned the rollers, sometimes slowly, sometimes with sudden force, the ropes tightened, pulling her arms and legs in opposite directions. The pain never stopped. It was not meant to kill, but to break the spirit. This method was carried out under the authority of the Spanish Inquisition, formerly called the Tribunal del Santo Oficio de la Inquisición. Even though the Inquisition publicly claimed it cared about spiritual correction and not cruelty, documents from that time, including Procesos Inquisitoriales, trial records, showed their constant use of moderate torture to force confessions, especially from women. Many accused heretics could not read or write, or they did not understand Latin, the language used for their charges. In such situations, the rack became not only a tool of pain, but also a way to force them into submission to both religious and institutional power. Women were at greater risk. Accusations of sorcery or moral failure, often nothing more than gossip or suspicion, were enough to justify torture under extreme conditions. Once she was tied to the rack, the accused woman was asked the same questions again and again. If she denied guilt, the rollers were turned further. If she confessed, it was usually because her body simply could not take more. Some writers said confessions led to absolution and penance. Others were burned alive at the stake. The rack drew no blood that could be seen, but it destroyed lives. For the Inquisition, the rack was a quiet partner in its mission of control, forcing truth not with reason, but with tearing flesh. The pair of anguish, a tool of silent terror. She sat in silence, her fate sealed behind the heavy stone walls of an inquisitorial chamber. There were no crowds, no open trial, only the dim light of a torch in the presence of a device later known as the pair of anguish. Though its exact origin is still debated, this iron instrument is described in many accounts after the Inquisition and in later torture records. It was shaped like a pear and split into several metal petals. The device was used in inquisitorial settings to punish people accused of different offenses. Depending on the accusation, it was placed inside a bodily opening and then expanded by turning a screw, causing terrible internal pain without leaving marks on the outside. The device made of iron was not created to kill right away. It caused no external bleeding, and the pain it gave was hidden inside the body. When it was put into the mouth, it was often used on people accused of blasphemy or of spreading forbidden speech. For women, though, it was mostly linked to accusations of moral sins, occult practices, or ties seen as spiritually corrupt. Its use, whether fully proven in Spanish Inquisition records or taken from later legal and punishment manuals, showed a dark mix of control, shame, and violation of the body. Even though it was not named directly in the official trial logs of the Tribunal del Santo Oficio, its place among torture tools in post-Inquisition collections suggests it was part of the larger punishment culture of that time. The Inquisition had a rule that torture must be done without spilling blood. Devices like the pear fit this rule, causing extreme pain but leaving no open wounds. Its effect on the mind was just as harsh as on the body. The act of forced insertion was a way of showing power, especially in a system where purity was enforced through ritual suffering. It turned the body's own openings, its most vulnerable parts, into weapons against women, punishing them not only for their actions, but for what others claimed they stood for: the judgment chair, spikes for the accused. Later writings called it the judgment chair, or sometimes the interrogation chair. It was made fully from iron or heavy wood and was covered with hundreds or even thousands of sharp spikes. These spikes were set on the seat, the back, the armrests, the legs, and even the footrest. Once seated, the accused, often a woman charged with witchcraft, heresy, or moral sins, was tied down tightly. Models of the torture chair existed across early modern Europe, but in lands under Inquisition control, its symbolism was kept with special care. The victim could not move. Iron locks on the wrists, ankles, neck, and waist made sure that any slight movement pushed her skin deeper into the spikes. In some cases, the chair was heated from below with burning coals, turning pain into scorching torture. The Spanish Inquisition did not always name its tools directly in records, but reports from places under its reach, especially Aragon, Castile, and the Kingdom of Naples, show the use of the silla de interrogar, the interrogation chair, as a way of forcing people before trial. It was not built to kill, but to get information, force confessions, or break the will before further questions. Once a woman was tied into the judgment chair, she was told to confess. If she refused, she faced hours or even days of pain without escape. The judgment chair did not prove guilt, it only made resistance impossible. For the inquisitors, that was often more than enough. The Spanish Inquisition used fear, faith, and the human body itself to enforce obedience, not just through executions, but through devices that stretched the limits of human suffering. How did religious courts excuse torment in the name of salvation? Comment below. As Johann Weyer, a doctor from the 16th century who opposed witch trials, once warned, "The cruelty of these men is not less than that of the tormentors of the martyrs."